Hello, everyone. We're live. Welcome back to the People's Basics live stream. It's John Munitz once again here to give you another episode, this time on another mayoral candidate in New York City. So we've been going through a series of the candidates. This is generally a stream where we're just reacting to whatever's on the mind. But the first topic of importance to me that I've been really wanting to go through the past week and this week has been the mayoral candidates, because that's something that's on my mind as someone who is in that area. It's one of the big races, taking a national figure like an Andrew Yang and bringing it to the mix. And I think, frankly, 2021 is going to be the year of amplifying local politics, in my opinion. And so I think no better place to first start than where I am myself and the races that we have of importance. So far we've been able to break down, some of the more minor candidates during our first live stream. Then after that, we decided to do a breakdown of Andrew Yang's policy platform. His had enough depth that we actually had to break that up into a couple of different parts. And then we had done the live stream breakdowns of Scott Stringer, Eric Adams, and Maya Wiley, who are the odds-on top competitors to Andrew Yang in the field. I will disclose ahead of time, like I do in each of these videos where I start breaking down people's policy platforms. I have endorsed Andrew Yang ahead of time. So I want that bias to be properly disclosed when I go through any of his competitors' fields. It kind of makes sense with the overlap that we have in our policy platforms of universal basic income and universal basic services and democracy reform and efficient metrics and yada yada. The list goes on and on. I can bore you all day. We did 4 hours of it, so go watch that stuff instead if you really want to hear about that. But we have a nice full playlist for you all to check out that this video is also included within, and you'll see more candidates to come included in that. So if you want to learn all of the New York City candidates, we have a playlist for you all on our YouTube for you to all go check out. But I'm not going to delay any longer. We're already 2 minutes in. Let's get into the policy breakdown that today we're going to be doing on Dianne Morales. And I want to remind you all, please let me know if you have any questions along the way. I'm going to be stopping after each page that we go through of Dianne Morales' platform. So I'm going to be taking any comments and questions in between then. So first, we're going to go to her About page, and we're going to just learn who she is as a person. I think this is what we've been doing for each person, at least for the major players in the field, the people who are actually going to have an influence down the stretch in this race. Dianne is one of those. I don't think she's like a top 3 tiers of candidates in this race. Like, she's someone who's currently polling at around 2 to 3%. So she can have an influence in that this is a ranked choice voting primary, and who she kind of aligns with, as she is currently already done with Scott Stringer so far, can have major implications on the race. So let's meet her a little bit more. So she goes, let's cut to the chase. If you're looking for a candidate who solely wants to protect luxury developers, Wall Street, or the interests of the wealthy, Dianne Morales is not your choice. So, first statement, I'm making enemies. These are the people we're calling out. We're calling out the luxury developers, Wall Street, and the wealthy. So it's a very clear signaling of a type of candidate. We got someone who is kind of more like an AOC type, a Bernie Sanders type, maybe even a Warren type in there. Like, let's focus on the wealthy first. Next, but if you're looking for a champion with a proven track record of creating solutions to meet the needs of the lifeline of our city, your candidate is Dianne Morales. So someone who has a proven record of doing solutions to help people in need, I guess, is the basic message. Next statement, Dianne is, like many of us, is a Bed-Stuy native, single mother and proud daughter of Puerto Rican parents. Dianne understands our city systems, from public housing to public schools. Dianne's mother was an office manager for the Leather Workers Union, and her father was a 32 BJ member and a former building manager on the Brooklyn waterfront, the area known as Dumbo. They lived in NYCHA, and little Dianne was often the translator for her abuela, Arosa, who shared a room and a bed with Dianne. Diane's family was a part of a community, a village that looked out for one another because the city failed to provide the basics their neighborhood needed. Her family taught her to lift as you climb. Even as an adult, this fight didn't end. A mother of 2 children with learning differences, Dianne sued the city's public school system to get resources her daughter needed to learn effectively. So I always find like some people do care about the background a lot more. It's like an informed experience of what you grew up in, and the childhood development experience, but I feel a little bit disconnected from that sometimes because it's like for a lot of these people, for the age that they are, like it was a radically different time, a childhood at those times compared to what children go through now. And so I like to know a lot more, like, what have you simply done lately? So that last point of like suing the city's public school system is kind of interesting to me to help her daughter with looks like learning differences. I don't know specifically what that necessarily entails, but as someone who has gone through my own challenges with that, especially when I was very young, yeah, I could see that being a very important thing and admirable thing to be able to accomplish successfully. Next thing, Dianne is the only former New York City public school teacher in this race, and that matters. I'd love to know how long, because I know recently she's been working at the nonprofit. So I don't know how long she's been a public school teacher. So that's a factor to weigh in. I would want to look into that a little bit more. Next, she says she knows firsthand how segregated schools have divided young people based on race, income, and zip code. So yeah, that's definitely true. Our school system, especially on the funding side, has been very discriminatory in how we get things funded, especially because so much of our school system relies on property tax. And inherently, poor areas are going to get less money from property tax because their property is valued as less. So yeah, that's not going to be the best measure of fueling a community. You fall into these traps. Like as your community faces more and more blight, the schools end up getting like frankly killed first, and like that makes it even harder to recover. And then you continue to fuel, like a lot of the times, the police stations, because crime rises when blight is on the rise in areas usually too. And so you keep trying to corral the crime problem. And I'm not saying you don't need some police force, but a lot of these other basic services get stripped from these areas. So she's right on hand there, but I know right now her basic experience, and she's definitely going to get into this, is she's working with FIPS currently, which is a nonprofit. So that's the only reason I'd even ask how long has she been a public school teacher, because she didn't bother to call out how long she was. She just said she was. Next, she says she is the former executive director of The Door, where she launched a street outreach program on the Christopher St. Pier for homeless LGBTQ youth that expanded to create a drop-in program for homeless youth and a supportive housing development. She also established the strategic plan for what would become the Broome Street Academy, the first New York City public high school targeting homeless and foster care youth. Dianne has always focused on co-creating spaces committed to transformation, inclusion, and equity with, for, and by the community. So I like that. Like there's a lot of things that need to have kind of targeted help for the foster care system sometimes, because a lot of these kids also end up being sometimes moved between environments at times. And likewise, the homeless population is a similar population that while they're trying to establish permanent shelter, they have usually sometimes temporary shelter measures. They too might be a little bit more mobile in where they end up as an address. And so they need kind of like targeted education sometimes for those efforts, because our current system doesn't address that well. Obviously, we'd love to have the funding, but she was someone from the outside trying to organize something like this. So that's a really admirable affair. Next, she goes into that FIPS stuff that I was just telling you all about. She says, in her most recent position as the executive director and CEO of FIPS Neighborhoods for almost a decade, Dianne's management of a multi-million-dollar budgets resulted in the creation of a career training program for young adults in the healthcare field. The program successfully exceeded national promotion and retention rates. Dianne has also developed and overseen programs addressing housing insecurity, mental illness, foster care, and education. Dianne's impact is global. She served on the ground during the Hurricane Maria recovery, helping to establish the Fundación de Mujeres en Puerto Rico, which elevates and supports women's leadership and representation in Puerto Rico's rebuilding efforts for sustainable relief. So I guess the one question I have about that is, like, I know one of the other things that FIPS is very well known for is it's one of the top evictors in New York City. So sometimes I'm wondering, like, what exactly are those housing insecurity programs that they have? But it's also like, what is she specifically responsible for? Like, there are different like responsibilities potentially as executive director. I guess that would mean you'd oversee most of this, so you'd have some responsibility, but I'd be curious how she addresses that part of her record and what FIPS does. And I know they've had the moratorium, so I'd love to hear specifically, and we'll see if she has this addressed in her policy platform. Like, we're going to have a lot of problems once these moratoriums for evictions are lifted. So I think that there's going to be a lot to address there. And I will say, I didn't get to cover this because we were going very long in our Maya Wiley episode. But she had an evictions page that we did not get to go fully through as a group. But I highly recommend everyone check that out because she actually did a specific section for evictions that I think is worthwhile. And I might do another clip on in the future because I thought it was interesting. I just felt we were going a little long last time. But in that same heart, let's keep going through Dianne's platform. And let me know if you have any questions along the way, because we're now basically towards the end of her page here of who she is. Her last paragraph goes, if you ask Dianne, she would likely say she's a learner, a survivor, and a working single mother of two, trying to do her best. But to so many in this city touched by her leadership, she is so much more. From being a founding member of Jumpstart, a national early literacy organization, to organizing and marshaling demonstrations against police brutality, to co-leading mutual aid efforts in response to food and clothing needs during the coronavirus pandemic, Dianne is an equity champion who still embodies the lift as you climb mindset from her childhood. So I think there's a lot to be admired there in the, one of the jobs of public service. And I think we got to touch on this a lot in our episode as a team at People's Basics when we were talking about Texas. One of the responsibilities of leadership is to be with your community and help your community, knowing that government is, I think very many of you know this from being followers of the channel, it's complicated. It doesn't always work how we want. We try to make gradual progress. We try to make bigger gradual progress to make sure that everyone's covered and has all of these basics. But we know it has shortcomings. And so it's important to take the time to be one of the people who doesn't just, uses your words, but steps up and, if you have the time, is able to give back and do mutual aid for others. I know everyone can't do that. Not everyone does have the time, especially with the economy and the way it is. And, that's one of the main reasons we try to, frankly, advocate for so many of the policies we do, is so that we could free up people's time, the most valuable thing people have. But yeah, I love that part. And I love that she also says that she's been standing at some of these protests. Not every candidate is always willing to go to these things. I know myself during this summer, I went to 3 of them. I wish I had gone to more, but the last one, it kind of shook me up a little bit more. That was the one I actually went to in New York City. It's a little bit more chaotic. And then it was just like the COVID concerns kind of started to amplify my mind as well. And it's like, sometimes it's like you have to know where you are most effective. And so it's like at that time, I didn't feel like I was being a particularly effective voice in the crowd and was not having the like necessary, frankly, like crowd management skills where I'm not just ending up as a liability at that moment. Like, you have to have these things where I think, in my opinion, you have like more centralized leadership running them. And I didn't feel like that happened at all of them. Some of them were better run and actually were really good, and others weren't. And so, like, I just had not heard of any of the ones that were being particularly well managed, and so I have not gone back. But I appreciate her stepping up and going to these and marshaling demonstrations, like actually trying to lead them. That takes a lot of effort. And so, I'm not someone who's trying to run for office right now. I'm not trying to be that force, but I admire her because, like, right now, I could be moving to a whole nother community at another point. I'm very like next job dependent. But she knows she's like New York City bound. She has kids there. She's in the New York City public school system. She's grounded there. And so she's now leading that community's effort. And I commend her for that. So let's go to her policy page now. And then after that, we will go into any of your final questions, because I had read this ahead of time and that there's not as many details as you would need for one of the longer episodes that we've done so far. So we'll have probably some time to address any questions that you all have during this. But the first thing I wanted to go through is her 100 days. So, because it's one thing to have the policy platform, which she also has here as a page. It's going to be pretty similar, you'll see. But I like to see kind of like the prioritization. Really, like when tire hits the road, essentially, when you're starting your first day in office, what are you focused on? Because you can't do everything. We know that. Like, time is very valuable. And so you're going to hopefully have other people who do these different functions. But what is your like priorities as a mayor? And I think that is a very key fundamental like role of what any person does, is laying out what are your priorities. And so her priorities here are as follows. And again, one of the things I'm going to say here is I like the bullet points. I want the meat and potatoes. Give me the details here, because I think Dianne Morales is a true progressive in a lot of ways, but I think that she does not have the details, in my opinion, to really say we can launch day one with this whole agenda. And so I'm just saying, give me those, because these are great bullet points, though. So let's go through them. So first, she wants to advocate for basic income relief. Love it. Obviously, one of the top priorities of our program. So we love that she is prioritizing that in her campaign. But again, how much? How many people? Who's it targeting? Like a lot of questions there. There's just it's a great bullet point, but it doesn't tell me anything about what the actual plan is. Next one: advance a small business recovery strategy, including grant support for entrepreneurs impacted by COVID-19. Okay, so vague. It's just saying like, hey, we got city money for some entrepreneurs who need it and helping small business. Like, how is that run? Again, love the idea of like focusing on small business recovery, but what entrepreneurs are we helping? Is it a program for everyone? How do we like figure out who gets it? How much can they get? Lots of detail questions. Next one: execute an ed equity executive order. An executive order to desegregate schools, free CUNY, and increase culturally responsive schools, curriculum, and educators. So, yeah, I would want to know specifically more what she is thinking by desegregate schools. I agree with it in concept. Obviously, we should have equity in our schools, but there's a lot of different things that can mean. Like free CUNY, that makes a little bit more like I can understand the details. You want to provide free community college. Again, seems very reasonable to me to have that. And then you want to do some curriculum reform. I don't know what it mean by like culturally responsive per se. Like that just feels like a little buzzwordy. I guess it means kind of localized, maybe. That's what it sounds like to me. It's like a little bit more freedom for curriculum and for educators. That's kind of how I hear that. But again, don't let me make assumptions here. Like other voters are going to make assumptions, and maybe you want that. Maybe you want them to just kind of catch on to any vaguism and assume the best. If they've made it to your website, maybe they are assuming the best already. But someone who is actually looking for details is going to be asking a ton of questions here. Next, defund and decrease the NYPD's power by removing them from schools and traffic enforcement and ensuring the next budget sees them defunded by at least $3 billion. That's one of those things where you're going to end up disappointed on that one. Like, I don't get me wrong. I do think we should be doing some pulls from the budget. But I think 3 billion is one of those things where if you promise it, you're going to fall short and you're going to have people be disappointed. You're going to have the people who just didn't want any defunding already upset at you. And then you're going to have the people who were fighting for a whole 3 billion get upset at you when you fall short. Now, I can hear this being like an anchoring effort in negotiation. Like, we're going to start at 3 billion and hopefully secure 1 billion or 2 billion, what have you. But I think it'd be nice if we could have like a leveling of this, like maybe even like over several years, you'd cut it to 3 billion. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear kind of like the inside game of what she's thinking there. If it's purely that, it's reasonable in a sense. Like it's political gamesmanship. But if she thinks she's going to get that, I think that's a bit much. Like most of the advocates, when you had the protests, like you were seeing this in the reporting, 1 billion was frequently the target ask that they were looking for in defunding. And I think with the rise in violent crime that we've been seeing in the city, I think 3 billion is a huge ask. So that's my one criticism there. I think it's a bit much that she's asking for, but I also agree with her in trying to remove law enforcement, frankly, from doing some of these other types of jobs where we don't need their level of enforcement, essentially, and their level of use of force, like in the schools and traffic enforcement. Definitely agree with that. But again, this is like, that doesn't even go at enough of like the details. Like we saw on some of these other candidates' platforms, a ton of reforms, especially things like that bring the actual community into kind of administering some accountability. So I want more details there, and I think that ask is unreasonable. Like one of the things with anchoring as a technique is you have to have the ask be reasonable for it to be taken seriously. Otherwise, they can go on the counteroffensive and treat you as an unreasonable person and polarize the issue against you. But if you ask slightly above and it's in the reasonable ballpark, that's how you do effective anchoring. And so I just feel like this is a high anchor. Like if I was her, I would have done 2 billion. Like that would put me in the position where I am the most aggressive person in the field on how much I'm willing to cut. But I feel like I'm still in that reasonable ballpark. And I can even say that it makes it more likely that when we get into the negotiation of the budget, I'm more likely to get that 1 billion because I'm starting with the 2 billion ask. And I'm expecting to get the full 2 billion. You obviously don't cave on your anchor, but maybe she actually just thinks that's what's needed. I might be strongmanning her argument of thinking that this is just a negotiation tactic. If that's the case, I just think that's just too big of a cut. As I said, because of the rise in violent crime, I just think that is a bit too much, especially over like a 1 year, 3 billion cut. I think if you're going to do it, phase that in as a cut. Let them adjust over time. But I just think that's too much all at once. I think what's that, like 3/8 the budget right now? Pretty sure. So yeah, not huge there. Next, protect our immigrant neighbors by ensuring NYPD no longer works with ICE and increasing funding for legal assistance and know your rights training. Okay. I mean, this is just so that they don't do the transfers. And yeah, there can be definitely some discrimination that comes from that. Just like in no capacity, I don't know. Like, I'd need to know a lot more about their relationship. I'm not naturally opposed to that. But I feel like there's other things, like especially with ICE's like Homeland Security divisions, that makes me go like, I feel like they are supposed to work with our police. Now, if you're talking about like the ERO within ICE, then yeah, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. But I'd love to know more. The other part I think is great. Providing more legal assistance and know your rights trainings. Yeah, we should be having a lot more people be informed about what is the actual process, and that people who might have language barriers have proper representation and aren't being screwed over, frankly, because people aren't willing to actually understand them because they don't have legal assistance. Next, she wants the citywide rent moratorium, including business leases for small businesses and ensuring our small businesses receive assistance to stay open. Okay, sure. Yeah, makes sense to me. Yeah, I think this is a great policy. We need to do a little bit of a rent freeze while we're trying to do the relief package. If you want people to, frankly, stay home and you're going to be shutting down the businesses, you gotta do the rents along the way. That's like one of the main reasons why small businesses have been getting killed. All these restrictions, but the rent doesn't get restricted. My God, how do you survive in that environment? And so I understand why so many people want to just freaking reopen because they're dying from all these recurring bills. And guess what? Yeah, you can't get evicted right now because we have that moratorium, but that doesn't stop the bill. That doesn't stop the debt. You're going to dissolve at some point if you're not getting the business you need and you're still having the same rent. So you got to do some form of a moratorium, help people get back on their feet. Yeah, so love that idea. Again, I'm not going to keep repeating this. So this is the last time. Give me the details. Immediate housing to end homelessness, beginning with vacancies throughout the city, including hotels, city lease properties, and abandoned spaces. So does that mean like just ordering them to go there or like seizing those properties, like with a land trust, like buying them up? I'm not sure, but I'll let her clarify that on her social media, or maybe she'll update this website at some point. We'll have to do these again in the future, I think, closer to when voting time happens in June. Implement a COVID-19 equity and data response unit to review, assess, and address the ongoing vaccine disparities throughout the city, especially in regard to race, gender, and sexual orientation. So let me see. I don't remember seeing this. I feel like that's okay. I didn't see it. Yeah. Like, here's the thing. I get this. Like, we want to make sure it's equitable. But how do you not have on here something that just says, let's make sure we're doing it effectively? How do we properly distribute it so that it's getting out faster and that we're getting it out to more people and that more people feel secure that it's been done and so that we can start reopening? Like, this is something where it's like, I get it. Like, we want to make sure things are being done fairly. But I think first we got to make sure that things are being done and efficiently too. Like, obviously, you want to target this to the most vulnerable. And yes, sometimes that means people in more crowded areas that tend to be more low income. That means people with potentially vulnerabilities health-wise who need this, whether that be just people in general who have other illnesses that make them more vulnerable to, like they have chronic illnesses that make them more vulnerable to coronavirus, or they're elderly. Yeah, there is prioritization that needs to be done to make sure that this is equitably distributed. But like these other things, it's just like we should be making sure that it's universally available, that everyone gets it, that we have such a good supply and distribution system that it just is not a problem, that we don't have to study this, but that we're just doing it that efficiently. And so I don't mind when people talk about this type of stuff, but I feel like you have to put the first things first and just do a good job on distribution. Because I don't feel like they do this anywhere on the platform. And that's a big miss, in my opinion. Next one, ensure language justice, especially in COVID-19 outreach materials and creating a translation corp to increase the city's ability to provide accurate and understandable translations. This I agree with. I think there are like ways we can even technologically advantage ourselves here. Like there has been a lot of advances in how we have used language translation services via voice and other forms too. But yeah, obviously one of the things that we have to do is make sure that everyone who's working within our system can understand it. And that also means, in my opinion, increasing educational opportunities for people to learn English in our area too. Like, I think that's a way we can have a standardized way of having everyone in the city have a comfortable way to interact with each other too. So I think, yes, we should make sure that everything in our city is accessible to people. And so another thing that would kind of go like this, I would love for there to be some focus in a similar way. If you're going to kind of focus on an access issue here, let's expand it to disabilities. Like a lot of people need help in trying to have materials that are for them too. So maybe that's included. Maybe sign language is included. Maybe Braille is included when they're talking language. But I'd love the call out. Like if you're going to make an access pitch, make the full access pitch. Next, provide mental health and grief support services in coordination with culturally responsive health wellness professionals. This is a buzzword for her. Culturally responsive. She loves this buzzword. And again, I'm going to assume this means like localized and of the same culture, which might mean like, for instance, in education, we have seen many a study that has shown evidence that kids generally learn better from educators of the same racial background. They're still studying like why they think that is, but they've seen different studies show like evidence of people having like aspirations that they can achieve more when they see role models that kind of look like them and that can relate to them and have maybe had some similar lived experiences to them. I think we'd be foolish to say that everyone has the exact same experience. I could never potentially claim to have the same lived experience as a Black person in America. And I don't think anyone would begrudge me for saying that I can't do that. We have different experiences, and I think someone who is like these individuals in their schools can provide that better. And so I guess that's what she means by culturally responsive. But yeah, I mean, this is good to just have as a focus. But again, I have no idea what she means. It's just like we're just going to do a plan. We're going to do something. We're going to work with the people. It's going to be responsive, and it's going to work with those health professionals. We're thinking about it. Next one, launch NYC 5000, a culturally relevant health navigator strategy to connect uninsured, housing insecure, and other vulnerable populations to COVID-19 education, testing, and vaccines. Okay, so this is an education platform for trying to make sure that people are prepared for COVID-19. So again, this doesn't address the distribution, as I was saying before, but this is the education side. And so this is needed because it's like, it's one thing to, like, if you think about it on, even in a business sense, like if you think about vaccines, like even as a product, I know we shouldn't always do that, but it's very easy to see these things. You have a distribution system. You have to get vaccines. You have to have a supply. Then you have to be able to distribute them out. Then you have to have the people who can actually administer them to the population. And then you have to have people who actually come through the doors to accept a dosage on these things. And so you need all of these different parts as the basic strategy of how you address COVID, is how do you get each person connected to that system efficiently? And so this is doing one of them. This is how do you get people in the door? And so I think this is needed. Again, like, nah, I'm not going to say it. I said I wasn't going to say it again. So let me just go on to the next one instead. Create a municipal green jobs agenda. By finally investing in lowering carbon emissions in NYC, we can invest in thousands of jobs while also working to combat climate change. Again, love it. We preach that we do need to address climate change, that there are plenty of job opportunities out there, that we need to try and increase the productivity of our economy, that there is so many things that we can be doing for just efficiency's sake, that it's not just things to make our planet greener and have cleaner air, but it's cost effective too, and it provides good jobs. So love the idea. And again, we will see if there's more here, but I'm going to take a quick break in between to check the comments, see how everyone's doing here. Okay, so I see we got some comments from Dan that I might want to be addressing so far. So let's see. What do I want to address first? Yeah, I mean, this is the big thing we were saying. There's a lot here that we could have went through, but I mean, a lot of this is we got to be like promoting. Actually, here's another good one that you had said. We need, like, this would have been a great one. Like, if you're going to do an accessibility plan, like, where's the safety? Like, I didn't see anything on the safety. And I don't just mean like, oh, traditional crime senses. I mean, like, pedestrian safety. Like, how do you protect bikers? How do you protect people who are just trying to walk through the city and be able to just live life? There's a lot that is desired in that regard. And I will just say, she is definitely like, she's aiming herself as the progressive in the race. She does have a good background. She does care about helping, but I don't know. It's a light on details and a little bit high on rage campaign at times. It's a little bit too righteous for not enough backing of, well, let's see the details. So like, let's go through this policy platform. You're going to see that wait, sorry about that. Page is reloading. Come on. There we go. So, as I was saying, is this on me again? Or is this just a bad page? Oh, no, it's just a laggy page. Yeah, because it's the color scheme when it's got to load. Yeah, so that's why. Okay, so what I was about to say is that a lot of what you're about to see here, same thing. Like, there's not a lot there. Like, I would love to click on these things and then like go to some great elaborate plan, but there's none. Like, I click on each of them and there's none. But I mean, like, let's see what is here that's a little bit different, just a little bit different. So we know she wants to involve the community. She wants to hear the unheard. She wants to have creation of programs and strategy together, work together, and be intersectional. So yeah, work together when we make these things. She wants to guarantee housing. Yep, we said that from before. Good priority, affordable. We can do this. Expansion of public housing. Details is always lovely. Small business and cooperative economy. Again, good priority. Love this. I'd have this in my own platform. Integrate our schools and build equity. Would need to know a lot more about what that means, but I agree in principle. Democratizing health and care. I have no idea what that means, but I like the word democracy, and I know health and care are important. Green jobs, green food, green justice. Green. Oh boy. Jobs, food, and justice. Lovely. Like, don't know what it means. Defund the police, fund the people. Agree with that. Think the target's unreasonable, but I agree with that in principle. And I would love to know what you're also trying to do to keep people safe. Public infrastructure investment. Yep. Free college. Free community college. Yep. People-centered tech pipeline. Don't know what that means. Like, if this was Andrew Yang, they'd be saying some tech bro shit. I have no idea what this means. But I mean, yeah, I kind of, it could mean a lot of good things, could mean bad things. I have no idea. Public banking, love it. Very important policy. I would love to see what that means for her. Gender and sexual equity. Again, what does that mean? Like a lot of this are good words, but they don't mean a lot. Some of these things do, like a wealth tax. This is substantive. She wants to do this. I'd be curious to know, like, what she would be trying to say to how the high administration rates of the past of other wealth tax examples occurs, what she would be trying to do if it gets struck down as unconstitutional, what rates she would be doing. I'd also be like really curious, like, what is her like idea of what happens if there's more wealth flight? Like, we had that as a big problem from New York City, is that people left and a lot of our economy suffered from just people leaving. Like, how do you want to address that? And it's even easier to leave a city than it is to leave like a country. So I don't know. There's a lot to be said about that. And then land and development accountability, no idea what that means. That could mean so many different things. That could be a NIMBY position. That could just be, that's so vague. And then last, strengthening workers' rights. Yes, we can agree with that in principle. And there's rarely examples where strengthening workers' rights is something I could ever oppose. So good. It gets a call out. I like it. But that's all that we got for Dianne. So yeah, she talks a good game, really does. Talks a good game, but that's all we got, folks. So Dan, we look forward to seeing it because I think there's a lot of good headers you got there. But let's wrap up, folks. I am now seeing that we've addressed most of the comments that have been in our chat so far, and so I want to just remind everyone we'll be back here again 2 p.m. Monday to Thursday each week, and then again we'll have our team live stream Thursday nights at 8 p.m. So we hope that you'll join us for these live streams. We'll hope that you will hit the like button and the share, help us out building that algorithm up again. And we got some really cool things to come. We had our most recent democracy episode last week with Adam Christensen. You're going to really love that. And we got our upcoming one with Richard Ojeda. So that's going to be fun. That's on freedom, justice, and security. But with that being said, and you know what? I'll answer this question. Yeah, we're going to be covering all the candidates. So tomorrow, I think we're covering Carlos Menchaca tomorrow. No. He's later in the week. Tomorrow we're covering Raymond McGuire. Then we're covering Sean Donovan. Then we're covering Carlos Menchaca. Then I think we go into the next week and we cover Laree Sutton. And did I miss one? No, I think that's it. Yeah, that's our schedule. So yeah, that's what we got upcoming. Thank you all for coming in. I hope you have a great rest of your day, everyone, and I hope everyone stays basic out there.